Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to the 2017 Japanese Grand Prix live commentary stream and chat. For best results, I do recommend that you position yourself strategically between your television or other preferred medium of race consumption and the sound of my voice, as of course, as always, I will not be live streaming any video or audio of the actual session in progress due to all sorts of restrictions on that sort of thing. Ferrariman601, greetings, and you are lucky number one here tonight on the live chat. Very good to see you. Also, congratulations on your recent achievement, 2,000 subscribers. You're growing really, really fast. The prize for first comment is a shameless plug for your channel, Ferrariman601. Yes, absolutely. Go check out his stuff. Ragnar Rock, I know who you are. Your name is Enrico. Yes. Nice to see you there. Kelvin, hello. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever it is in your particular locale. Have a good whatever it is. It is just coming up on 1 a.m. here on the east coast of the United States, and, well, it's another one of those all-nighters. Of course, these flyaway races on the Pacific Rim, it is always a test of mettle for us American F1 fans, particularly here on the east coast. I am envious of anybody who is on the west coast because, well, it is still Saturday for you, but it is very early Sunday morning for me. It's not as bad as in the middle of Europe, however, where it is already morning, and yeah, it means it's Sunday morning for these guys. It's a mess. It's absolutely a mess. I'm sorry I cannot read Japanese, but whoever you are, hello, Forza Ferrari, yes. And yes, living in Southeast Asia, yeah. Yes, it is exactly a 12-hour difference between Malaysia or Japan and the United States at this point. No, that would mean... No, it's a 13 or 14-hour difference between here and Japan, but it is exactly 12 hours difference from where I am in the eastern United States and Malaysia. It's 12:47 a.m. for me, Sunday morning. Once again, greetings and salutations to all of you. As we're coming up here, just passing 12.5 minutes to go before the start of the formation lap, let's go through the starting grid for today's Japanese Grand Prix. Of course, we've got Suzuka on tap. It is one of the classic circuits. I believe it opened in 1964. Honda owned this circuit. They've used it as a test track for its entire existence, and it is absolutely brilliant. It is one of the last old-school style racing facilities in the world, and rather interestingly, it is one of very few figure-of-8 configuration circuits. Of course, it's the only circuit on the F1 calendar that has a figure-of-8 configuration, meaning that it crosses over itself. There's a bridge that carries the racetrack as it's approaching the 130R corner at the end of Sector 3, and the exit of the Degner complex passes underneath that bridge. So the cars are passing underneath one another over different points of the lap. Anyway, we have got Lewis Hamilton here in car 44 on pole position, Hamilton's 71st pole position. P2, the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel. P3, the Red Bull of Daniel Ricciardo, followed by his teammate in P4, Max Verstappen, the winner of the most recent Grand Prix in Malaysia. P5 for Esteban Ocon, a great qualifying performance in that Force India. P6 for Valtteri Bottas. Bottas had a rather eventful day yesterday. He had a crash in FP3, and that seems to have affected him in qualifying. We'll see how he gets on in the race. P7 for Sergio Perez in the second Force India, and then P8 for Felipe Massa. P9 for Stoffel Van Dorn, a great qualifying effort, all things considered, for that number 2 McLaren, and then bringing up the rear for the final points-paying position off of the grid, Kimi Räikkönen in P10. Raikkonen also had a crash in FP3, and, well, Ferrari had a lot of work to do to get that car ready for qualifying. P11 for Nico Hülkenberg in the Renault, P12 for Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. His teammate lines up P13, Romain Grosjean. Grosjean had a big accident at the end of Q1. He lost it through the S's in Sector 1. That car was trying to crash all day long, and it eventually caught him out. P14 for the debutant Pierre Gasly. Of course, Malaysia was his debut race, and he did a pretty good job. We'll see if Gasly can improve on his finishing position from Malaysia. P15 for Lance Stroll in the second Williams. P16 for Marcus Ericsson for the Sauber team, and P17 for his teammate Pascal Wehrlein. P18, the last Formula One appearance as far as we are aware for Jolyon Palmer. He has officially been sacked by the French team. P19 for Carlos Sainz by virtue of grid penalties, and by virtue of a 35-place grid penalty, Fernando Alonso in P20 in the number 14 Mick Honda. So we have one Mick Honda in P9 and the other Mick Honda in P20. Typical form. Yes, I am well aware of what's going on with the comment stream. Yes, it is a commentary stream. There are all sorts of restrictions governing what I can show you in terms of a visual standpoint, but I can talk about whatever I want to talk about due to all sorts of First Amendment rights here in the United States, as well as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, courtesy of the United Nations. So that's my defense. I'm talking about Formula One, but I'm not showing you anything that has to do with Formula One. Yes, getting around things. I love it. Just coming past 9 minutes to go before the start of the formation lap. And now that we have some more people here, I just want to reiterate the prize for making the first comment here on the live stream. You get a shameless plug for your YouTube channel, Sim-Racing604. Go check him out. He's a relatively new sim racing YouTuber, but he's growing very quickly and he's putting out some great content. So definitely go check him out. Anasto1, good morning. I believe you are my first confirmed Greek listener. Very, very cool. I don't speak any Greek, so sorry about that, but good morning. Good morning to you in Greece. Very early good morning from me in the United States. Xerxes, you are not the first person to tell me to come to Brazil. I actually have the privilege of working with a lot of Brazilians. I'm an English teacher. I teach English to immigrant students to the United States, and quite a few of them are Brazilians here, either on student visas or on F1 visas, working as au pairs for American families, and they all tell me, come to Brazil, you'll love it. I'm not so sure about that. Brazil's a hot country for the most part. I don't like hot weather. I like changes of seasons. I don't know how well I would mesh with Brazil. Predictions for the race. Well, I predicted this in Malaysia and it didn't happen. I figured that Lewis Hamilton was just going to scamper away from the rest of the field on lap 1, but I'm going to stick with that prediction and I think that's going to happen again. However, Sebastian Vettel, if he wants to keep any chance of a championship alive, he needs to win today. There's absolutely nothing else that'll work for him, realistically. If he gets a good start, that may happen. However, if that Mercedes with its oil burn logic gets off the grid very well, and then Hamilton is able to pull out a gap of at least 1 second by the end of lap 1, that's absolutely it. So it all depends on that formation lap and the getaway from the lights. Yes, Jonathan, I do think I would like Belgium, quite honestly. The only way Mercedes doesn't win this race is if they've got problems, and they had some... I'm not entirely sure what the problems were in Malaysia, but Hamilton said that the car just didn't feel right, and, well, that could mean any host of things, and I was led to believe that during the race they had hybrid system issues. However, I really didn't see any of those reports substantiated in the intervening weeks, so I don't know what the actual cause of the lack of performance by Mercedes was last weekend, but they are back on form today, and Hamilton set an outright track record in qualifying yesterday, so that Mercedes is fast around here. What is a bit confounding is the relative pace of Bottas. Have they turned that car down just to keep him out of Hamilton's way going for his 4th championship? It is quite possible. After all, Hamilton had a fight with Rosberg all the way up to the end last year, and he did not much like that. Is this Mercedes appeasing Hamilton's ego a little bit? I don't know. Perhaps Mercedes did run low on oil in Malaysia. It is always possible. There is one thing that I am wondering about, though, technically speaking, on these engines. I don't think it has anything to do with oil consumption, but I've noticed in a lot of trackside video that has been shot of these cars, not so much in the official FOM coverage, but just from amateur video of people at the races, I notice on some engines, the Mercedes engine and the Renault engine in particular, there's a sharp and distinct change in the engine note as the drivers really get hard on the throttle. Sometimes the engine note sounds quite muffled, like you might expect on a turbocharged engine, and then other times it absolutely cracks open loud and clear, and I'm not entirely sure what's causing that. I don't know if it's an anti-lag system on the turbo that's sort of recirculating some of those exhaust gases or what, but there is often, I've noticed it particularly on the Mercedes and the Renault engines, that there's just a very distinct change in the engine note as they're on full throttle. I'm not entirely sure what that is. Jordan and Guy, I cannot show you real video of the race because that is illegal. I can talk about the race, but I cannot actually show you the race. I would love to show you the race, however, I can't do that. Yes, Mr. 604, I have been testing the updated SF70H, and I would say at this point I'm about 2 seconds down on my previous times that I had set at various circuits. It's about 2 seconds on average, and I'm not entirely sure why, but I'm now having the same problems with the handling as I did when they first released the car. I'm not getting enough stability on the rear end, and initially I was trying to add more rear wing, and this is when we first got the car, but the problem is, if the more wing you add to the rear, then the more wing you have to add to the front to compensate, and then you lose all of your straight line performance, so that doesn't work. The thing that helped me the first time before the update was released was lowering the tire pressures and just getting the rubber to bite into the circuit. The problem is, I've already got the tire pressures down to about 8 psi now, and this, I can't really go much lower than that before I start chewing the tires up. So the problem is, I'm not entirely sure what to do. The rear end instability that I had right from the first release is back, and I don't know how to remedy that now. I'm playing with rake angles in terms of the relative pitch of the front versus the rear, ride heights, spring rates, things like that. I've sort of got it figured out, but I'm still not entirely satisfied. I'm watching the race on domestic U.S. television. At any rate, we are about 30 seconds away from the start of the formation lap. The grid is being cleared. The tire blankets are coming off. And the cars and drivers are now left alone for the green lights to come up in front of the field. It is a beautiful day at Suzuka. There is bright sunshine. There is essentially no threat of rain whatsoever, which is in stark contrast to what we saw on Friday. A little bit of oil purge smoke coming out of Hamilton's Mercedes, and 2 p.m. local time rolls around the clock, and the field leaves the grid on the formation lap. As far as the ESPN deal for domestic U.S. television goes, I'm not entirely sure what it means for us. ESPN has not shown Formula One for, I believe, 2 decades, if not longer. Therefore, they don't have any brain trust who knows much about Formula One in all likelihood. I also don't think that they are quite willing to invest in the on-air talent. The commentary team that we have right now on NBCSN is very good. Of course, we've got David Hobbs and Steve Matchett, who had been there since the Speed TV days. Lee Diffie has also proven himself very valuable and very worthy of the position. I was skeptical of him at first, but he really has come into this role very well. If ESPN wanted to do it right, they would have to bring over Steve Matchett and David Hobbs, and also either bring over Lee Diffie or bring Bob Varsha back. Bob Varsha from the Fox network. He was the lead anchor for Speed TV's Formula One coverage when they had the deal, and I always loved his particular commentary style. He's always a very articulate guy, very knowledgeable guy as well, and really appreciated the technical and historical parts of the sport. So I have missed Bob Varsha in the NBCSN coverage, but Steve Matchett and David Hobbs make up for it a little bit. As far as what ESPN will do, time will tell, but I can't help but think that they're going to turn it into some sort of pay-per-view gimmick. Will Seb beat Hamilton? Well, we're going to find out in a few seconds here. Hamilton is just bringing the field into 130R right now. So far, the formation lap has gone off pretty quickly, and everybody got away from the grid very nicely. Just seeing Van Dorn there in his P9, warming up his tires. Hamilton coming through the triangle and now sweeping down onto the starting grid. Everybody here on these shots into the pit lane, they are looking rather nervous for the start of a race. A little bit more nervous than usual, I must say. We are coming down toward the end of the season, so things are starting to count now. Hamilton and Vettel coming to the grid almost in perfect synchrony here. Just doing their last burnouts before they get to their respective grid positions. Hamilton has taken P1 and Vettel has stopped alongside in P2. Fernando Alonso coming through the triangle now, consolidating his P20 starting position. Vettel going through his pre-start checks. Fernando Alonso has now made his way onto the grid. Seeing some smoke coming from the front brakes of Max Verstappen's car. That should be fine once they get rolling. Fernando Alonso just taking his grid position. The medical car is in position. We stand by for the lights here at Suzuka. The lights are coming up. 3 lights, 4 lights, 5. Pause. Lights are out, and we are away for the Japanese Grand Prix. Good start by Hamilton, and a good start by Vettel. Hamilton slots in front of Sebastian Vettel as they head into Turn 1 for the first time. The two Red Bulls running very closely together, however, they managed not to make contact. There was some light contact through the back of the field. We're going to see there's a McLaren off at the back. That was Stoffel Van Dorn, I do believe, from P9. However, the front runners are making their way through the S's for the first time. The order is Hamilton, Vettel, Verstappen, Ocon, Ricardo, Bottas, Perez, Massa, Hülkenberg, and Raikkonen. Your top 10, Van Dorn indeed did go off at Turn 1. We have a car off in Sector 1. It is Carlos Sainz. I cannot confirm at this point if there's anyone else involved. Local yellow in Sector 1 for Carlos Sainz going off. Heading into the hairpin, Max Verstappen has managed to overtake Sebastian Vettel. They are into the hairpin just at the beginning of Sector 2. However, can Vettel fight back against the Flying Dutchman? We shall see. Through Spoon for the first time. Verstappen has consolidated his position over Sebastian Vettel. Nico Hülkenberg and Kimi Räikkönen fighting through Spoon Corner. Räikkönen forced off line and off the road by the German. Räikkönen has now lost all sorts of track position, waiting for timing and scoring to shake itself out here. Carlos Sainz now classified as stopped at turn 7, waiting to see him. Max Verstappen, meanwhile, has managed to pull away from Sebastian Vettel. The order at the end of the first lap is Lewis Hamilton leading Max Verstappen by 1.4 seconds. He is followed by Esteban Ocon in P3. Sebastian Vettel suddenly is dropping out of the order very, very quickly. Vettel is now down to P6. What has happened to the Ferrari? Vettel attempting to fight back Valtteri Bottas, and he is unable to respond to the Finn. Safety car has now been deployed. Sebastian Vettel, does he have damage on the front end of that Ferrari? His front wing does not quite look symmetrical from the onboard shots. It's a little bit difficult to see. The safety car has been deployed. Is this for Carlos Sainz stopped on track? Indeed it is. Carlos Sainz stopped at turn 7. We have marshals on the circuit assisting him. Let's get some time to catch our breath after that start. Lots of events happening here off the start of this Japanese Grand Prix. Safety car deployed for the stranded car of Carlos Sainz. That was deemed to be in a dangerous position. Looking at a replay of the start, it was Kimi Räikkönen who managed to get around Stoffel Van Dorn, who is then pushed wide by Räikkönen again, on board with Max Verstappen in replay. Both of the Red Bulls get nearly identical getaways, it must be said. However, Verstappen has the inside line into turn 1, which gives him that position over Daniel Ricciardo, and then immediately puts him in position to attack Sebastian Vettel. Vettel seemed to have plenty good pace off the line. Carlos Sainz was actually punted off. Aha! There it was. Carlos Sainz was punted off through turn 4? He was not punted off. He's lost it by himself on cold tires, it appears. Car just oversteered and he spun into the outside barriers on the outside of turn 4. He did manage to get it rolling again. However, I'm not entirely sure how much damage there was to that Toro Rosso. Meanwhile, in replay, Hülkenberg and Räikkönen came together briefly in Spoon Corner. Räikkönen then went backwards as he was forced to leave the circuit. Räikkönen currently classified in P14. For what it's worth, Esteban Ocon now has fastest lap of the race at a 2:02.656, running behind the safety car. Sebastian Vettel on board with him in replay. What happened? Absolutely no power. Overtaken by Daniel Ricciardo and Esteban Ocon and Valtteri Bottas in a straight line. No power coming from that Ferrari. Onboard live with Sebastian Vettel. No, that's in replay as well. Verstappen taking him at the hairpin. We need some follow-up on that story. What is wrong with Vettel's engine? Safety car coming in this lap according to timing and scoring. And of course, right on cue, US terrestrial television goes to commercial. I do agree, this very much looks like the Ferrari of the 1980s and early 1990s. This is absolutely disgraceful. We have gone the better part of 10 years now without a Drivers' or Constructors' Championship, and it is far too long. Italy expects, the world expects, Ferrari, you are the most illustrious name in motorsport, and you haven't put a championship together in the last 10 years. That is absolutely disgraceful. You have a 4-time world champion driving for you. You have your most recent drivers' champion still driving for you. You can't put it together. You can't blame your drivers. I think you can blame your management, however. Meanwhile, according to timing and scoring, the race has now resumed. The order: Hamilton, Verstappen, Ocon, Ricciardo, Bottas, Perez, Vettel, Massa, Hülkenberg, and Magnussen, your top 10. US television still in commercial break here. We have missed the restart. Thank you very much, ad breaks. Through Sector 1, Hamilton purple in Sector 1 with a 34.523. The gap between he and Verstappen is 0.926 already through Sector 1. Sebastian Vettel, according to timing and scoring, still scored in P7 at this time. He has been overtaken by Sergio Perez. Felipe Massa will be next to attack. Hamilton fastest in Sector 2 at a 42.330. The gap between he and Verstappen is 1.4 seconds already. Finally, US television comes back to the race. Sebastian Vettel, radio, box, 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 we're going to retire. That is the end of the World Championship, ladies and gentlemen. Mostly gentlemen, I assume. That is it. Your 2017 Formula One World Drivers' Champion-elect, Lewis Hamilton. Your World Constructors' Champion-elect, Mercedes. That's it. Sebastian Vettel pulls into his pit box. He switches the car off. The Ferrari is out of the Japanese Grand Prix, and so with him goes the World Championship. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton, fastest lap, a 135.024. The gap between he and Verstappen is 1.3 seconds. Meanwhile, in replay at Spoon Curve, Lance Stroll had an excursion into the runoff. Painted those tires a nice shade of green from the artificial grass there on the outside. And he was also pushed off by Pierre Gasly at 130R. That's a scary place to go off. However, there's a lot of asphalt there now. It used to just all be gravel. Meanwhile, Kimi Räikkönen fighting with Romain Grosjean. That is for P9. Räikkönen has it. I beg your pardon. That is with Kevin Magnussen in the other Haas car. Kimi Räikkönen, of course, the only Ferrari remaining in the race. Ferrari taking the engine cover off of that SF70H. Sebastian is still in the car. There's really no point in him staying there at this point. Even if they could get the car back out, there's no chance in hell that he could recover positions. He'd be so many laps down. It really does not even... It doesn't even warrant their investigation at this point. Support Kimi and then go home with your tails between your legs because you have absolutely nothing to be proud of. Ferrari, what is wrong with you? How have you lost all of your direction as a team? You have not been anywhere near respectable since, well, honestly, 2004. Let's be real here. The last time that they managed to dominate a championship was 2004. Yes, they won the Constructors' Championship in 2007, but when you go back on the count back with all the points, with all the race results, had Spygate not happened, McLaren really won the 2007 Constructors' Championship. 2008, they won it by default as well. And then, ever since the aero regulations changed for 2009, they have been absolutely nowhere, and particularly since the introduction of these V6 turbo hybrid power plants, Ferrari have been absolutely nowhere. It has been far too long. This is far too much of a joke at this point. Ferrari almost look as bad as McLaren Honda. Sebastian's still sitting in the car. I don't know if they're telling him, hey, we want to get you back out, or if he's just sitting there because he doesn't want to face the reality that this championship is well and truly over at this point. Even if Hamilton drops out, it's virtually an unassailable lead. Speaking of Hamilton, fastest in Sector 1, 34.325. Compare that to Verstappen's 34.520. Sector 2, 42.493. Verstappen, 42.734. The gap is 1.77 seconds. Hamilton, fastest lap, 1:34.917. He is 1.8 seconds in front of Max Verstappen. As far as what has been going on with Ferrari, I don't know. I don't know if I can really think of any one glaring thing that has caused Ferrari's slump in form. Clearly, they were never going to be quite the same team as they were when they had Michael Schumacher and Ross Brawn, because those two guys working together, you've got the design genius of Ross Brawn, and you have the driving genius of Michael Schumacher, but also the organizational genius of Michael Schumacher. He really just had the ability to rally people around him and rally people around in the team to keep people's spirits up and just to keep everybody motivated. Because I think of a season like 2003, which was a bit difficult for Ferrari, particularly getting the 2003 car out. They didn't debut their F2003 for almost half of the season, but Schumacher, fighting with, at that point, which was a year-old car, still able to fight for the championship, and they managed still to win that championship. I mean, Schumacher had the ability to do that. Meanwhile, in Sector 2, we have Marcus Ericsson. He has nosed into the tire barrier someplace in Sector 2. He is outside. He's on the outside of the circuit, approaching... No, he's in the Degner curves. Yes, he has got it wrong. In the Degner curves there, just approaching the crossover, heading to 130R. It's the same place where Kimi Räikkönen lost it yesterday. Don't know if we'll need a safety car for this. He is well off the circuit. Ericsson is still in the car. Did not look like a particularly significant incident. Virtual safety car deployed for the Ericsson shunt. Meanwhile, Hamilton sets fastest Sector 1 time, 34.266. Was that set before or after the VSC? Kimi Räikkönen has made his way past Nico Hülkenberg for P8. Yes, the good news is that Julian Palmer is gone. Here in replay with Ericsson. Yes, just a bit too much over the curbing on the exit of the first Degner. Got him wrong on the braking, and then, yep, straight off the circuit. Couldn't even really make an attempt to turn the car. So from one useless driver to another, we have Marcus Ericsson and Jolyon Palmer. Palmer, at least, we don't have to deal with him anymore, quite thankfully. I thought that he was going to be gone in Malaysia, yet obviously he did do that race, and he's here in Japan as well. I think Palmer has stayed in F1 for about a year too long, to be perfectly honest. He has never shown even the slightest hint of talent, as far as I'm aware. And whenever he makes a mistake, and it is quite often that he makes a mistake, he immediately comes up with the most outlandish excuses. He blames other people. Last race in Malaysia, he said that, well, he spun on multiple points during the race, but he said that his first spin in particular was caused by a gust of wind. And I find that quite bizarre, because does the wind just hit one car? How come everybody didn't spin then if the wind was so strong that it managed to push him off the circuit? Did the wind just hit his car and no one else's? Honestly, what are we doing? Yes, Sebastian Vettel is out of the race. Some undiagnosed problem on that Ferrari. Meanwhile, Stoffel Van Dorn comes in for a pit stop here on lap 10. Good stop by the McHonda boys. Of course, they're trying their best to show off to the home crowd. If the McHondas can make it to the checkered flag, I'm pretty sure that they'd consider it a race win. I cannot confirm if Vettel is actually still in the car. We haven't seen him in the pits. Meanwhile, the VSC is being stubbed down. The track is clear, and the green flags are up. We are racing again around the entire circuit here. Sim604, why did I want to dust off Jerez? Well, I had never driven it in Assetto Corsa. It always has been one of my favorite tracks, but I never really found a good version of it for AC. I have found a good version of it for AC, and, well, it's just as I remember. I hadn't driven it for about 3 years. The last video I could remember posting from Jerez was actually back in 2014 in R Factor 1, so it's been a long time, but did a couple laps, my memory was restored, and then, well, I took out the R25 and just blasted it around. It's a great track. I've always liked it. It's probably the best track that F1 no longer goes to. Yes, I do think it's even better than Istanbul. It's a compact circuit. It's a short lap, but it's got tons of high-speed corners, some twisty bits as well. I absolutely love it. Yes, the Force Indias, that Stegosaurus comment, that is actually an allusion to an aerodynamic appendage that they have running across the top surface of their shark fin. There are, for want of a better word, there are a series of rather jagged serrations running down that shark fin, and I'm not entirely sure what that's for. I think, rather counterintuitively, I think it's actually to induce some turbulence in front of the rear wing. Not to spoil the airflow, but rather to get more air toward the rear wing, because, of course, as these cars are designed to be as slippery as possible, what ends up happening is there's a zone of neutral pressure just above and behind the cockpit where the engine air intake is. And that's what you need for the engine. You need clean, neutral air going into the engine, but at the same time, you need high-pressure air going into the rear wing to generate more rear downforce. So rather conversely, I think that Force India are trying to mess up the airflow a little bit to try and steer a little bit more air toward the rear wing and improve rear downforce. I don't think those fins on the shark fin have anything to do with the midsection of the car itself. Meanwhile, in replay, we saw Sebastian Vettel out of the car. He is officially out of the race. The order working lap 12. We have Lewis Hamilton leading Max Verstappen to the tune of 3.1 seconds, so Verstappen is well and truly out of DRS range. P3 is Daniel Ricciardo, who is a further 6.1 seconds behind his teammate. P4 is Valtteri Bottas. P5, Esteban Ocon. P6 for Sergio Perez, who is only 0.9 of a second behind his teammate. These two have a history, of course. P7, Felipe Massa. P8, Kimi Raikkonen, who is 0.714 behind Massa, so we have Raikkonen and Massa fighting it for P7, P9 for Nico Hulkenberg, and P10 for Kevin Magnussen in your final points-paying position. Out of the race at this time are Ericsson, Vettel, and Sainz. Yes, Cameron, that is effectively what I'm getting at with my Force India shark fin analysis, because just like those vortex generators on an aircraft wing, what they're doing there is they're trying to smooth out on aggregate the airflow across the entire surface of the wing, and in particular they're trying to smooth out the airflow on an aircraft over the horizontal stabilizer at the rear of the plane, so that as you know, with the Venturi effect, if you can, and Bernoulli's principle as well, if you can influence the flow characteristics of a small channel of air, you can thereby influence the flow characteristics of a larger channel of air, because it tends to attach to itself through cohesive properties of fluid. So if Force India can manage to steer a little bit of air toward the rear wing in the immediate vicinity of the rear zone of the car, they can then hope to have more flow attach itself to that rear wing and make it more efficient in downforce generation. Those vortex generators on aircraft wings, by the way, they can actually increase an aircraft's fuel efficiency at cruising speed and altitude by as much as 20%, just by adding a couple feet of vertical flick up at the wingtip. It's really cool. Meanwhile, Kimi Raikkonen, with some DRS assistance, overtakes Felipe Massa on the start-finish straight, similar to how he did with Giancarlo Fisichella here in 2005, although that was for the race win. Kimi Raikkonen is now up into P7. His next target will be Sergio Perez, who is 3.4 seconds up the road. At this point, Sebastian Vettel, he's in his third season with Ferrari. He has had ample time to acclimate himself to the team. I think he is trying really hard to be that leadership force at Ferrari. We know that he has been learning Italian since he came to the team. His Italian's actually starting to get pretty good. But at the same time, this is where we can really test the mettle of Sebastian Vettel. Because Michael Schumacher, yes, he had a similar story coming to Ferrari. They were in a bit of disarray. They were the last holdouts for the V12 engines, which were just too heavy and too inefficient by the time 1995 rolled around. So for 96, they moved to the V10. Schumacher came on board, really started to play his hand in developing the car around him. We started to see that come good in 97, fighting for the championship. 98, really fighting for the championship against Mika Häkkinen. 99, I'm pretty sure Schumacher would have won the championship in 99, but for a broken leg at Silverstone. And then, of course, finally it all came good in 2000. So it took Michael Schumacher 4 seasons with Ferrari to turn them from a team very much in disarray into one that could win the world championship. And Vettel is now approaching that milestone. 2018 is going to be his fourth year with Ferrari. Can he start to turn the fortunes around? Perhaps. Ferrari have not had that bad of a year, all things considered. They have won a few races, and of course, Vettel managed to win with them in Australia to begin the season. So they did start the year with some pretty good momentum, but they just could not maintain it through the middle and now latter parts of the season. If Ferrari do come back to win a race or two at this point, it's still not going to be enough. This is most certainly going to be a Mercedes and Hamilton year, but I think this is where Sebastian Vettel can prove his merit, not just as a driver, but as a leader. Michael Schumacher had that leadership ability. He could walk into a room, and then all of a sudden everything got quiet, and everybody just wanted to hear what he had to say. But Schumacher, quite critically, he was not the kind of person who let that influence go to his head. He always used it in a constructive, cohesive manner to push the team forward. Can Vettel do that? I don't know. I've already put in a bid on the F2001, Jonathan, and my bid was $1. I think I'll probably get it. How many more championships could Vettel win? Well, theoretically, he could win every championship that he participates in. The problem is, where is Ferrari in all of that? They've proven this year that they can build a good car. The SF70H is a good car. It is competitive. The problem is, it's not the car so much that's the problem. It's not the drivers who are the problem. I mean, we call Vettel and Raikkonen world champions for a reason. It's the brain trust at Ferrari that's the problem. It's the logistics, it's the management at Ferrari. They don't have their head in the game, and I'm not quite sure where that fault really lies, but that's the problem. They can't get these cars prepped adequately. Clearly, we had problems in Singapore with the drivers making mistakes, but here in Japan, the car just died. That shouldn't happen to a name like Ferrari. We're used to seeing that happen really in the backmarker teams, but Ferrari can't get a car to start the race properly. That's absolutely terrifying. Yes, the similarities between the circumstances of Schumacher entering Ferrari and Vettel entering Ferrari, they really are quite similar. Before Vettel came to Ferrari, their last Drivers' Championship was 2007 with Raikkonen. Raikkonen won that championship on merit. The Constructors' Championship, however, was not won on merit at all. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel, speaking of him, he's totally going to get fined for climbing up on the pit wall there while the race is under green flag conditions. However, he's a four-time world champion. In my opinion, he could do whatever the hell he wants. But Schumacher was able to bring that team back from the ashes. Can Vettel do the same? He does have the sort of persona to be able to do it. There is always a gravitas around him, but can he use that constructively? We have yet to see him really come into hard times and dig deep. Maybe you could argue that he did that in 2010, coming from behind to win the title, but I don't know if he really can do that. Meanwhile, Felipe Massa, speaking of Ferrari drivers who should have been world champions, there we go. Good pit stop by the Williams boys. Meanwhile, we've got a yellow flag in Sector 3, waiting to see what the issue is, if there actually is one. That yellow has been stubbed down. Perhaps just a simple off and on by somebody. I see nobody stopped on timing and scoring. It is very much like the 90s before Ross Brawn came on the scene, and honestly, it was the combination of Brawn and Schumacher who came together. Ross Brawn had the theoretical technical knowledge to develop the car and to design the thing well as a good overall package from the beginning, but it was Schumacher who understood, not only from a driving perspective, but Michael Schumacher had formal training as a mechanic as well. He understood how these things worked, and then he was able to use the theory knowledge and then put it into practice behind the wheel. I see no reason why somebody like Kimi Räikkönen can't do that. I think he is trying to help Ferrari. Kimi Räikkönen also has some formal training as a mechanic. However, I'm not entirely sure why Ferrari can't get the development together mid-season. The car is still competitive. I mean, Raikkonen is running P7 right now, which is about where Kimi Räikkönen runs these days, but Vettel qualified P2. I mean, it really is on the managerial side where Ferrari have their problems, and therein lies perhaps some of the cultural laxness, for want of a better term, that we might see from Italy in general. Everything tends to be at a more relaxed pace. Everything is more emotional rather than rational. And Ferrari, they're an Italian team run by Italians, and they can do their own things in their very Italian way. But that's not how you win championships. And Ross Brawn and Michael Schumacher proved that. Yes, Kimi Räikkönen made that pass on Perez for P6. His next target will be Esteban Ocon. The Force India is definitely going backwards here. I tell you, Kimi Räikkönen really likes overtaking at turn 1 at this place. Of course, you have to remember this race in 2005. Kimi starting from, I believe, 18th on the grid that day. He came back to win, and he secured that win with an absolutely sensational final lap pass on Giancarlo Fisichella. Wow, I can still go back in my memory and replay that moment. I think I woke up the entire house cheering for Kimi as he was making that move. It was an absolutely tremendous maneuver. It's still the best overtake I've ever seen in my time watching Formula One. Working lap 21. Lewis Hamilton has 5.3 seconds in hand over Max Verstappen. He's on the same tires, the super softs, as Max Verstappen. I think Mercedes should probably be heading to the pit lane now. Meanwhile, we have Ocon in the pits. He goes from the super softs on to the softs. Decent stop by the Force India guys. When will the Merc boys pit Hamilton? I'm not yet seeing them in the pit lane. Ocon resumes behind Fernando Alonso. Alonso up to P11 at this point. His teammate, Stoffel van Dorn, has waffled his way down to P16. What might have been? Max Verstappen making a pit stop. Meanwhile, Fernando Alonso attempting to fight half-heartedly with Esteban Ocon. However, he really didn't make it that hard for the Frenchman to get past. Ocon resumes P11. Verstappen into the pits. How does this stop go for the Red Bull boys? Like clockwork, of course. In and out. Quick as you like. Verstappen resumes. Where? Whoa, that's close with Kimi Räikkönen there. However, Verstappen maintains his position in front of Kimi Räikkönen in P4. The order now on pit stop rotation is Hamilton, followed by Daniel Ricciardo, followed by Valtteri Bottas. Your top three, Verstappen in P4, resuming the normal running order. Perez also in and out. TV cameras pick up Lewis Hamilton running through 130R. He looks absolutely serene. He's not using all the road. He's braking a bit early. He is just on a Sunday drive. Mercedes in the pit lane. We have to assume this is for Hamilton. And indeed it is. Hamilton in the pits. Race leader is in. Meanwhile, Verstappen goes purple through Sector 2, a 41.987. I do not think he's going to be able to leapfrog Hamilton, however. Really slick stop by those Mercedes guys. We needed time on that. 2.4 seconds. Hamilton easily rejoins in front of Max Verstappen. Daniel Ricciardo inherits the lead on the rotation. Valtteri Bottas temporarily moves up to P2. Expecting Ricciardo and Bottas in any time now. Yeah, I tell you, those Germans, they are awfully efficient. I mean, they've got one of the fastest pit crews in the pit lane. They have arguably the most efficient internal combustion engine ever produced in the back of their race car. Again, they're approaching 60% thermal efficiency on their Formula 1 engine. That's just unreal. 60%. Of all of the potential chemical energy in a drop of fuel is being put toward propelling the car. It's not sound, it's not vibration, it's not heat, it's propulsive force. That's insanity. Deadpool asks, do you build plastic kits? No, I really don't. I do have model cars. I've shown you a few of them in videos over the years, but I don't really build plastic kits. I used to. I used to build airplanes and ships and that kind of stuff, but really don't have the time anymore to do it. If I'm not working, I'm either sleeping at the gym or working on YouTube stuff, so I don't really have time anymore for building models, unfortunately. I always enjoyed it, but it was something that I did as a kid, and now that I'm having to be a real-world person, it's I don't really have the time for it anymore, unfortunately. Yes, Cameron, I agree. These engines and these cars are really interesting on two fronts, and they both have to do with efficiency. The turbo hybrid engines are interesting for the efficiency and the amount of power that they can produce for the very small displacement that they've got. And the cars are interesting due to the amount of downforce and cornering force that they can produce with the aerodynamics, but they do lack the sound and the soul of those old V10s. And I started watching Formula 1 in the V10 era, And the thing that always distinguished this series to me from any other was the sound of those engines. When I first watched Formula 1 and I heard those engines, I honestly thought that they were gas turbines of some sort, because I had no knowledge that a piston engine could rev so high, but alas they could, and that's what really got me hooked on this sport. It was the sound of those engines. It was just so unique. We haven't had that for a long time now, and for me, that was the signature characteristic of Formula 1, because there are other series that have superficially similar-looking cars. You've got Formula 2, you've got IndyCar. Back in the day, you had Champ Car as well, and the cars looked very similar, but nothing else sounded like that. And that was the signature characteristic of Formula 1, and we haven't had it in a long time, and it's something we desperately need back. Daniel Ricciardo into the pits. They're ready with a set of soft tires to replace the super softs that he started the race with, working lap 26 of 53. We are just approaching halfway here in this Japanese Grand Prix. Good stop by the Red Bull guys, 3.1 seconds. That's considered somewhat slow nowadays, if you can believe it or not. Meanwhile, Nico Hülkenberg in replay, going wide slightly at Degner, doing exactly what Marcus Ericsson did. However, Hülkenberg just makes a slight excursion into the gravel. He avoids the wall entirely. That's how you do it. Take notes, Marcus. In terms of why there are so many mistakes this year at the Degners, I think it really is catching these guys out. The amount of grip these cars have through corners like that. The Degner turns are really fast, particularly the first one. It's a downshift, and then you just toss the car in on the front axle, and it just grips. They have so much grip. A lot of these drivers haven't driven the 2003, 2004, 2005 cars with really high downforce, and so it's the first time that these guys are grappling with that sort of cornering speed, and I think it is catching them out slightly. In terms of what's worse, the NFL management is certainly worse. Formula 1 management used to be just as bad, but Liberty so far have been doing a good job. I'm pleased with the progress that they've made this year. The NFL management, though, I've never seen an organization so out of touch with its customer base. It's truly farcical at this point what the NFL is doing. If you're not aware, if you're not an American, if you don't care about the NFL, and I don't really much care about the NFL either, but if you don't get a chance even to really see what the NFL is, it's the American Football League. It's not soccer, but there's been a controversy brewing because teams and team owners and players, they won't stand for the playing of the U.S. national anthem before the games, which is customary. Many countries do that for domestic sporting events, and they're doing it as a protest against the American flag and against the anthem of the United States, saying that it represents racism and all sorts of ridiculous things like that. And certainly people have a right to express their opinion under our First Amendment, and expressing of opinions is good, but not standing for a country's anthem, that's just a lack of common decency. You stand when someone's national anthem is played. I don't care what countries it is. Meanwhile, Max Verstappen has pulled within 1 second of Lewis Hamilton for P2. That is on aggregate P1. We'll see what's going on here. Bottas started on the opposite strategy of Hamilton. He has done 30 laps on his set of soft tires. Hamilton now running on those soft tires for his second stint. Bottas is still on his first stint. Mercedes obviously looking to one-stop Bottas. Probably to one-stop Hamilton as well. Bottas moves over and lets Hamilton take the lead. Is Bottas now going to play rear gunner and hold up Max Verstappen? Max will not be pleased with that whatsoever. Verstappen was compromised through turn 1 there. He was wide on the exit. Undoubtedly, he's dealing with the wake turbulence from the car of Bottas. Ferrari in the pit lane for Kimi Räikkönen. Off of the soft tires, onto the super softs. Pretty clean stop by the Ferrari boys. Did I see a problem on that left front? I hope not. No, the mechanic just lost his balance as he tilted away from the car. No problems there. Räikkönen is back underway with all 4 tires bolted securely to the car. Yes, Hamilton would be very ill-advised to do anything except stand at attention when the U.S. anthem is played, because you have to remember here, first of all, you're in a professional environment. You're not a private citizen anymore when you go to your place of work. You do not have necessarily free speech rights when you are on somebody else's time. You have to represent the interests of your employer, and the interests of his employer, his being Lewis Hamilton's, are of Formula One and of Mercedes. So unless he wants to speak on behalf of Formula One and on behalf of Mercedes, which I don't think they're going to allow him the luxury of doing, he needs to do what he's supposed to do, and that's about it. He can say what he wants on his own time, but on company time, no, he cannot do that. It would be very ill-advised, and certainly it would kill the nascent but growing image of Formula One in the United States. Indeed, they are keeping Bottas out to cover Verstappen. The gap between Verstappen and Bottas is 0.7 of a second. However, the gap between Bottas and Hamilton is 2.3 and growing. Again, I've got to say, that's a good strategy call by Mercedes. Keep Bottas out. Play the rear gunner, starting as far back as he did. It's amazing now that Bottas is running as far up as he is. Of course, he won't remain there once he makes his pit stop, but it's a very good strategic use of both cars. Valtteri Bottas now comes into the pit lane. Verstappen is released off of Lewis Hamilton. 3.4 seconds is the gap. Bottas rejoins on the super softs. Bottas getting with the program fastest in Sector 2, 41.821. Meanwhile, at the sharp end, Lewis Hamilton running about half a second a lap slower than Max Verstappen at the moment. The gap is almost 3 seconds exactly. The gap is coming down at the front. 2.7 seconds now between Hamilton and Verstappen. It's gone down by almost a half a second in the last lap. Again, Hamilton's last lap a 34.6. Verstappen's last lap a 34.2. The Red Bull is faster at this stage. Working lap 32 of 53. Kelvin, will you see a review of the Ferrari 312? The answer to that is yes. It's processing right now. You'll see it at 6 a.m. USA Eastern. Valtteri Bottas fastest lap, a 1:33.688. He is a full second a lap faster than Lewis Hamilton at this point. He's the only car in the 33s. Yes, Aiden, I haven't gone to sleep at all. I actually slept pretty late today in preparation for this. I was thinking perhaps I could get an hour or two of sleep before the start, but editing the 312 review video, it went a little bit longer than I anticipated. I plan to upload it tomorrow during the day for a late Sunday release, but, well, I got it done. I was feeling good. Decided to upload the video a little bit early and stay up, so... Yep, here we are. Approaching 2 a.m., almost 2 a.m. exactly here on the East Coast, and I'm still actually feeling pretty good. Working lap 34 or 53, yep, we're going to be fine for the end of the race. The SF70H has gotten an update in Assetto Corsa. I wouldn't say that it was too slow when it was released, but the update has actually slowed it down, and I don't know why. I thought the car was perfectly drivable in its first spec, and they've it almost seems like they've cut some downforce. But the car is a bit slower now that it's been updated. The F2004 has not been touched as far as I'm aware. Jonathan, to answer your question, I use Action as my encoder software, so that's what I use to record all of my raw video and audio, and then to live stream as well. I'm live streaming off of that Action software right now. For my post-processing, editing, and rendering, I use Cyberlink Power Director 14. Yes, there is a bit less power on the low end now on the SF70H, but at the same time, it's a bit more linear in its throttle response. The throttle response was very laggy in the initial release of the SF70H. You almost had to be at full throttle for the engine to start picking up revs at low speed. So that's a bit more tractable now, but there is less power under acceleration. And again, it feels like there is less downforce. There's a little bit more rear end instability again on the car. The gap between Hamilton and Verstappen is now down to 2.5 seconds, 2.532 to be precise. And it does appear that we have lost timing and scoring for the moment. I don't know if it's a problem on my end or if we've lost timing and scoring from the circuit. I'm attempting a restart of my systems. Yes, Cameron, I like iRacing too. The thing that keeps me away from it most of the time, though, in terms of the upper level races, is guys figure out a setup and then they share it with their friends, and then they're just seconds a lap quicker than everybody else, and they run away with all the races, and it just takes the air out of the balloon for everybody else. So the best I could ever do in the Grand Prix World Championship Series, or even in the IndyCar Road Series, most of the time I finish third or fourth, and I've got no chance of fighting for the win, simply because one guy has figured out a setup and nobody else has it, and it just sucks. It really does. iRacing is fun. I do think it is the most accurate sim out there today, but in terms of racing, it's just not. It doesn't have it. If you can't fight for wins in cars that you like, what's the point, really? We've got timing and scoring back up here. Awesome, awesome. The gap between Verstappen and Hamilton is 2.2 seconds now. Yeah, Cameron, the only time that I could fight for wins is in the fixed setup races, whether it's on the road courses or on the ovals. I've won on road courses, I've won on ovals, but only in the fixed setup races. It's once you start to get into the upper level races with the cars that are really cool, well, people figure out some alien setup and then they're just miles quicker than everybody else, and it just really takes away your motivation to want to synchronize your schedule with the races and all that kind of thing, so I don't really play much. .3 seconds is the gap between Hamilton and Verstappen. Hamilton's last lap a 1:34.313. Verstappen's last lap a 1:34.290, marginally faster than Hamilton. I've never done any official endurance races in iRacing because I just don't, I can't dedicate that kind of time really to be doing it. I mean, sure, sometimes I can, but most of the time I'm just not available to do that kind of thing. The gap has grown slightly between Hamilton and Verstappen. 2.4 seconds, now classed as 2.2. That was an odd blip on timing and scoring. Timing and scoring, we're having some issues with the timing system here today, but I do think I've got good data back. 34.212 last time by for Hamilton, 34.0484 for Max Verstappen. Aiden, I definitely agree with Martin Brundle there. Get out of the way if the Force Indias get close to each other like they are now. They're 1.2 seconds apart. There's bound to be fireworks between those two. Talk about poor managerial skills. Force India, they really needed to have a talking to both of their drivers after Spa, with that coming together, and really took them both out of points-paying positions. And I would hope that the prospect of a race ban, if not an outright firing, is on the cards for Ocon and Perez if they come together again, because that is entirely intolerable. They've missed so many points this year because they've taken each other out. Meanwhile, Hamilton fastest now in Sector 1 to 33.684. Compare that to Verstappen's 33.821 through Sector 1. On board with Pierre Gasly locking up the right front tire into the hairpin. I believe he lost a position there to Nico Hülkenberg for P12. Gasly complaining now of a big flat spot, as he well might. He did put a rather large one on that right front tire. He says he needs to pit. Will they actually pit him? We'll see. Yes, he has pitted. He's pitted alongside the illustrious Julian Palmer. Hamilton now running faster than Max Verstappen. His last lap time, a 1:33.911. Max Verstappen's last lap time, a 1:33.954. So the pendulum has now swung back in Hamilton's direction in terms of lap time. The gap is 1.7 seconds. As Cameron, I entirely agree with that. I saw that Force India on launch spec, and it looked absolutely dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. They are the only team to have that step in the car, in the nose. It looked really bad. I thought they were going to be at the back of the grid for sure, but they've been better than Renault. They've been better than Haas. They've certainly been better than McLaren. They have been the surprise of the season. The DRS is stuck open on Hülkenberg's car. Is this a hydraulic failure? Is this some sort of a mounting failure? Hülkenberg is now in the pits. Let's see. The Renault mechanic's pounding on that rear wing to get it closed. What will they do with Hülkenberg? Will they let him back out and just not have him use DRS? Or the longer he sits here in the pit lane, the longer... it's over. It's over for Nico Hülkenberg, it appears. The car is now off the ground. They're not going to let him run. They could have just put some tape over that rear wing and sent him back out, but not to be. Hülkenberg now out of the race. Yes, I did say that was a 1.7 second gap between Hamilton and Verstappen. It's now back up to 2.2 seconds. I mean, what Hülkenberg really should have done there was tell Palmer to pull into the pits and then jump in Palmer's car and finish the race. I mean, Palmer's done anyway. Bottas, fastest lap, 1:33.424, fastest of all in Sector 3 at a 17.8. Is Palmer even good enough to be in Formula E? I'm not sure. Meanwhile, in replay, contact between Kevin Magnussen and, it appears, Felipe Massa. Yes, Magnussen tries to go underneath Massa into turn 1. He picks up some dirt, and then he careens his way into the side of Massa's car. Some bits of carbon flying around. Nothing too major. Meanwhile, looking at the Red Bull of Daniel Ricciardo, he is holding third place, the final podium position. Valtteri Bottas behind him to the tune of 5.5 seconds. The gap at the front between Hamilton and Verstappen holding steady at 2.7. We've got 9 laps to go in this race. Will Verstappen attempt to charge? We all know that if he ever gets half a chance, he's going to do it. Yes, Formula Reject. That is Formula E for sure. I saw a very sobering compilation on Facebook a couple of days ago from the official Formula E page of the different sounds of the cars. It's... They're saying that they sound good? No, they sound like vacuum cleaners. People are saying that F1 cars sound like vacuum cleaners. Formula E cars really do. The only somewhat interesting thing in the sound of a Formula E car is that you get to hear the gearbox working. But most of the cars now are just direct drive, really. They've got one gear and it's slow, so yeah, that's it. Yeah, all that Halo business. It's the gift that keeps on giving. 2018 is going to be a make-or-break thing for F1. If they can bring Halo in and it turns out to be okay, then maybe it'll work out. But I do not foresee the Halo being a good thing for F1. Meanwhile, a very brave marshal just ran out onto the start-finish straight to retrieve a piece of debris, ran through a gate in the pit wall. That was certainly not lacking in bravery. The thing I don't like about the Halo is that the FIA admit that it's more dangerous in getting the driver out of the car. It's a hindrance. It's cumbersome. The FIA have added a further 5 seconds to the minimum extrication time, from 5 seconds now to 10 seconds. It's really dangerous. I mean, luckily, we don't see fires nearly as often in these Formula One cars as we used to, but fire is still a very real possibility in these cars, and considering all the batteries on board as well, if things get too hot, it could be a potentially explosive situation, so you want to get the driver out of there as soon as possible. I shudder to think of the possibility, but what happens if a driver really needs to get out of the car in a hurry, and he can't get out because of that Halo, or maybe one of his radio lines or his drinks bottle line, something gets snagged in that Halo as he's trying to jump out of a burning car. What happens? And whose fault is it? Driver of the Day voting is open. Who might we give it to? So far, really nobody has put in a performance that I think is particularly noteworthy. Verstappen has done a good job. Ricciardo has done a good job. Bottas has actually done a good job, all things considered. Raikkonen's been steely. Alonso up into P11 from dead last with a 35-place grid penalty. Maybe that's worthy of something. Palmer's actually running in P12 right now. double waved yellow now in Sector 4. Those are your timing sectors. And yellow in Sector 5. A Williams just went off. Who was that? It is Lance Stroll. Running very slowly on the outside of the S's. There appears to be some damage on the left-hand side of his car. Turning vane appears to be out of place. Stroll is stopped on the outside of the S's in Sector 1. That is timing Sector 5. Will this warrant a safety car late in the action? It very well could. Stroll appears to be stuck. My driver of the day vote goes to Sebastian Vettel. Yeah, what happened to Stroll there? He just went straight through the first part of the S's. Virtual safety car deployed in Sector 1. Keeps the gaps neutralized. Aye, there's a puncture there. There's a puncture on his right front tire. Did that happen before or after the off? I'm not entirely sure. Regardless, Stroll is now out of the car. Yeah, something definitely broke on that car. I don't know if it was just a straight-up puncture or what, but a big shower of sparks coming out from underneath that Williams immediately before it goes off. The car just goes straight. That's a scary moment. On board, what happens with him? Ah, yes, the right front rim exploded. We've seen that happen before. We've seen that happen on McLarens, in particular Lewis Hamilton in 2007 in qualifying for what was then the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, heading into the Schumacher S corner. The right front wheel exploded due to a mounting problem. Heikki Kovalainen had a similar failure in 2008 in Spain when the left front wheel exploded in a very similar fashion. And then I believe Hamilton had another failure similar to that in 2010, also at the Spanish Grand Prix. Very odd sort of failure, but we have seen that before. We now have a crane on the circuit here. The virtual safety car is out in Sector 1. I still do think that it is ill-advised to have a crane out there on the circuit, even with the virtual safety car deployed. This is Suzuka. In terms of Sim Racing 604's question, so far this season has been quite intriguing. We've had very entertaining races at very unexpected places. Baku comes to mind. I was very much expecting that race to be a snooze fest as it was in 2016, but that was a very exciting race. Malaysia was actually pretty cool as well. Another typically boring venue, but it's been cool. Suzuka tends to be entertaining, and today it really hasn't been all that entertaining. 4 laps to go now. Virtual safety car has been stubbed down. We're back under full racing conditions. Had we a more fierce fight between Mercedes and Ferrari, I think this really would have been a classic season. My hopes were very high after Australia with that Ferrari victory. It just never quite came to fruition, but can 2018 give us that battle finally? It is possible. Ferrari have proven that they can fight at the front. Now they just need to make it consistent. Meanwhile, Stoffel Van Dorn, fastest of all in Sector 1, 33.635. Van Dorn is in P14 and a lap down. Now, Fernando Alonso and Felipe Massa fighting it out for the final points-paying position. Massa has P10. Alonso wants it. The gap is half a second as they go through 130R. Alonso has DRS on Massa, 3 laps to go. Can Fernando do anything? We shall find out. Vettel dropped out of the race very early on with some sort of engine problem. We haven't heard anything official from Ferrari. Meanwhile, Bottas fastest lap, 1:33.144. The gap between Hamilton and Verstappen at the front is 2.1 seconds. Hamilton on the radio complaining of some sort of vibration from the tires. The gap is now down to 1.5 seconds at the front. Come on, TV director, show us that. Hamilton's last lap time was 1:37.937. Verstappen's last lap time of 1:35.983. Are things over at the front? Maybe not. The gap between Verstappen and Hamilton is now down to 0.6 of a second. Last time by Hamilton a 1:35.129, Verstappen a 1:33.730. Verstappen now coming in 0.3 of a second of Lewis Hamilton. Do we have a battle on our hands? Hold on a second here. If Verstappen gets half a chance, you know that he is going to take it. Come on, Max, you got 1 lap to go. Can we do something about this Mercedes? It'd be really cool if he could take 2 wins in a row. Hold on here. Coming into the final lap, I know it's extremely unlikely, but can Max do it? Verstappen does not have DRS down start finish this time. Felipe Massa is between Hamilton and Verstappen. Massa needs to get out of the way. This is not helping Verstappen at all. Come on, Massa, get out of the way. Fernando Alonso under investigation for ignoring blue flags. That's just what he wants to hear. And Felipe Massa is completely spoiling Verstappen's chance of taking the win here. Yep. That's it. Not happening. That is the one problem with Suzuka. That first sector, there is absolutely no room for lapped cars to allow traffic behind them through. It's just the nature of the beast. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton through the spoon curve. Felipe Massa and Fernando Alonso having their own tete-a-tete for the final point. Can Alonso do anything about Massa? He's trying on the exit of spoon. Not quite close enough. He will not have that VTEC kicking in to keep him up with the Mercedes-powered Williams. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton going into 130R for the final time. Coming up to the triangle, Verstappen is not close enough to mount a challenge. Rather regrettably, he caught that Williams at just the wrong moment. Hamilton through the triangle, sweeping down the long right-hander, back down to start-finish, and to the line. Lewis Hamilton wins the Japanese Grand Prix. Max Verstappen finishes in P2. Daniel Ricciardo will take P3 and the final podium position. Valtteri Bottas finishes 4th. Kimi Räikkönen will come home in 5th. And as long as everyone held station, Ocon and Perez will finish 6th and 7th. Magnussen 8th, Grosjean 9th, and Felipe Massa holds on to 10th place by just 0.8 of a second to take the final point. No points for the McHondas today. Fernando Alonso finishes 11th. 12th for Julian Palmer in his farewell. Not a fond farewell. P13 for Pierre Gasly, P14 for Stoffel Van Dorn, and P15 and last on track for Pascal Wehrlein. Not classified are Lance Stroll, Nico Hülkenberg, Marcus Ericsson, Sebastian Vettel, and Carlos Sainz. That is career win number 61 for Lewis Hamilton, his 3rd win at Suzuka. Again, one wonders where Sebastian Vettel might have been in all of this. I think he could have finished 2nd at very least. Not to be. Hamilton still complaining of vibrations on the in-lap. What's going on here? SibRacing604, thank you very much for your compliments here. I like doing these live commentaries. It's a change of pace. I don't think anybody else on YouTube is doing this, and it's a lot of fun. I get to play with some voiceover work, and I get to talk about Formula 1 at the same time, so it's a win-win for me and all of you guys. So you seem to be enjoying it. I definitely appreciate your involvement here. I love reading all your comments. Really, really cool. Yes, power unit issues potentially for Lewis. We'll see. Maybe it's just a software glitch. Or maybe he's going to have a 50-place grid penalty for the next race. We'll see what happens. Yes, Lewis has been lucky this year with reliability for sure. Conversely, the Ferrari boys have been extremely unlucky with reliability this season. This is the most appalling year for Ferrari reliability that I can remember. Have I watched Formula E? Well, yes I have, but I've never actually been able to watch Formula E live. And the strangest thing about Formula E was they recently had a race in New York. However, it was not being shown on any US TV networks, nor was it being streamed on the internet in the United States. So you have a race in New York City, but Americans can't watch the race. I could not understand that decision, and it completely turned me off from Formula E. I had slight intrigue in it because, well, it's all electric cars, it's pretty new, that sort of thing, but they wouldn't let me watch the race happening in my own country, just about 30 miles away from my house, so yeah, you lost me there. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton and Park Fermé saying a firm hello to Max Verstappen there. Ah, Felipe Massa hadn't been between those two guys. What might have been in that final lap? But anyway, today we have seen the consolidation of a championship lead for both driver and constructor. I think we have our 2017 champion-elect. In the cool-down room, Danny Ricciardo still hasn't taken his helmet off. Breakfast time for Bono. Yeah, it's not quite breakfast time here. It's 2:40 a.m. here on the East Coast. I'm gonna try and get some sleep after this. We'll stay with you through the podium interviews. There's world champion Nico Rosberg there in the pit lane. Rosberg, he signed a one-race deal with Sky Sports for this race. I don't know if that'll be a fixture for Sky Sports coverage. It'd be cool to have Nico in the commentary box, to have a a world champion doing commentary, it's also really cool. And the ever-orderly Japanese public now in a very civil fashion making their way onto the start-finish straight. Everywhere else in the world, you see the fans just absolutely storm the circuit. In Japan, everybody just walks on very quietly in single file. Daniel Ricciardo has already taken his P3 spot on the podium. Verstappen walks out. And Lewis Hamilton now to the top step of the podium standby for the British and German national anthems. That's the 61st time we have heard God Save the Queen for Lewis Hamilton. Whatever you think of him, he is certainly a phenomenon in Formula One history. Of course, a place like Suzuka was the traditional season finale for Formula One back in the day, and so many championships decided here. Those very emotional scenes of Michael Schumacher in 2000, how dignified he was with Mika Hakkinen in Parc Fermé. Thinking of Sebastian Vettel's 2011 championship win here, thinking of Jenson Button's race wins here. It's a very cool place, Suzuka. Of course, it was host to the battles between Senna and Prost, 1989. All of that. So much history at this place. All the drivers run off the podium to shower some distinguished guests with champagne. I'm sure that's popular. And with the podium interviews today, Takuma Sato, former Formula 1 driver, and of course the most recent Indy 500 winner. That's cool to see. Yes, will Lewis Hamilton go to the Indy 500? Well, Fernando Alonso set a precedent this year. I think perhaps Lewis could go to Indy someday. I think he would love the challenge, quite honestly. Daniel Ricciardo telling us, yes, it's his first podium at Suzuka. That was his objective for the weekend, and he has achieved it. He's always in a good mood, this guy. I've never seen him somber. He looks tired, but he's still got that smile. Lewis Hamilton not stealing Takuma Sato's Indy 500 ring, however, he does want one. Well, Monaco 2016, yes, Ricciardo was rather somber there. I think pissed off would be the operative word. Red Bull really bungled that one. Really, really cool to have Takuma Sato there doing the podium interviews. I always liked him. I thought that he was a really cool guy to have in the paddock, and I'm glad that he has now finally started to have success in IndyCar. His Indy 500 win this year was absolutely sensational. Yes, I was really pulling for Fernando Alonso, and I think he just may have been able to do it, but VTEC kicked in a little bit too hard. Lewis Hamilton dropping a phone off of the podium. How did that go? I think it hit the ground. Aha. Yeah, that was expensive. Not as expensive as that $5,000 champagne bottle, however. Talk about cutting costs in Formula One, and then they buy $5,000 bottles of champagne with GoPros on them. Just, where are your priorities? Of course, Toto is going to say no problems with Lewis's engine. Nothing's a problem for Mercedes. They can just throw more money and technology at it, and then everything is fine. Interesting here, back in the prep room, the drivers are leaving handprints in blocks of clay. I'm not entirely sure what all of that's about, but okay. The director of the premier German motor racing organization, the premier German automaker, being interviewed on German television. There's no way that he could possibly say anything untrue there. Well, as far as the Japanese Grand Prix goes, in terms of the spectacle, I don't know how highly I would rate it. It wasn't that interesting of a race, particularly when Sebastian Vettel had to drop out. He just went backwards in a hurry. Still no definitive answer on what that problem was on the Ferrari engine. We're hearing that it was a spark plug. Yikes. If something as simple as a spark plug can end your day, that's pretty worrying, but hey, it can happen. You've got to ignite the fuel, and, well, spark plugs are what do that. We don't have any diesels in Formula One, but Ferrari, again, the operative word for Ferrari this year has been, not quite enough. Unfortunately. I honestly, at the beginning of the year, I had really had high hopes of Sebastian Vettel being able to win this championship, but it really appears that it is not to be. Toto Wolff saying that the telemetry was not correct. Well, then why was Hamilton reporting a vibration, I must wonder. He said specifically that the vibration appeared to be related to the power unit. Now, is that just a weird resonance that he was feeling with certain rev ranges, which would not necessarily mean something with the engine, but maybe something in the chassis that wasn't secured properly? Or is that the beginning of a bearing failure someplace in the engine? Who knows? Yes, Julian Palmer will never complain of a spark plug failure. That much I can definitely assure everyone. Whether he's in Formula E or he's driving his Mercedes 190 diesel, he will not complain of a spark plug failure. However, as we tick through 5 minutes to 3 a.m. here on the east coast of the United States, I do have to call it quits here because it is an inhumanly hour to be awake. But anything for my beloved Formula One, and anything for all of you loyal people who are still here listening to this mindless banter to myself, basically. Thank you all very much for being here. However, I do have to call it a night at this point. Ferrariman601 saying thank you all very much. We will see you in 2 weeks for the United States Grand Prix from the Circuit of the Americas. Of course, we will see you before then with some more great Assetto Corsa F1 2017 and maybe even some iRacing content. We do have a review of the Ferrari 31267 coming out in just about 3 hours' time, so do watch your notifications for that. Notification squad goals, yes. Until next time, though, Ferrariman601 saying thank you all very, very much. Hope you enjoyed the race today, and we will see you soon.